What if the person who was supposed to protect you became the one who took everything away? That's the haunting question surrounding the disappearance of 12-year-old Lori Paige from Tallahassee, Florida. In the dead of night on June 3, 2023, Lorie vanished, leaving behind nothing but a trail of lies, suspicious behavior, and raising questions about the truth that no one was ready to face. Lori Paige was a 12-year-old African-American girl from Tallahassee, Florida. She was a dedicated and hardworking student at Griffin Middle School, where she was known for her academic focus. Lorie wasn't the type of kid who spent hours hanging out with friends or chatting during lunch. Instead, she kept to herself, always pushing to be the best she could be in school. Her teachers described her as incredibly smart and determined, someone who took her studies very seriously. In fact, Lorie was so focused on her education that she would often run between classes to make sure she wasn't late. She didn't want anything to get in the way of her grades, which she worked tirelessly to keep high. Her teachers noticed that if she received even a low score on a test, Lorie would be visibly upset, almost distraught. This fear of failure drove her to keep working hard, always striving to do better. Lorie's life outside of school was a bit more complicated. She lived in a quiet, middle-class neighborhood near Mission San Luis, a peaceful area that seemed like the perfect place for a young girl to grow up. For the past year, Lorie had been living with her father, Andrew Wiley, a correctional officer who worked the night shift. Before that, she had lived with her mother, Miranda Paige. However, things had changed the year before her disappearance, when her mother gave up custody of Lorie and she moved in with Andrew. While Lorie had a close relationship with her father, it was clear that she had spent much of her life in a household with her mother, and it was still a major adjustment for her. Despite this transition, Lorie seemed to be adjusting to life with her father. Her father worked nights, and during those hours, Lorie had a good support system in her next-door neighbor, someone she could turn to if she needed help. Andrew and Lorie had a generally positive relationship, but the dynamics in their family were shifting, and Lorie was still learning how to navigate them. The peaceful neighborhood where Lorie lived gave her a sense of security, but this stability was shaken when she suddenly disappeared in June 2023. While Lorie was bright and driven, she also carried some emotional weight, which became clear in her relationship with her schoolwork and the expectations she set for herself. She was a determined young girl who wanted to succeed in every way she could, even if it meant quietly carrying the pressure of perfection on her shoulders. Her life was far from ordinary, but she wasn't the type of person to draw attention to her personal struggles. Instead, she focused on doing her best at school, hoping to overcome any challenges on her own. On the morning of June 3, 2023, Andrew Wiley, a correctional officer, reported his 12-year-old daughter, Lori Paige, missing. He claimed that Lorie had left their apartment the night before, carrying a backpack, while he was at work. According to Andrew, she must have left sometime between his shift, which ran from midnight to 8 a.m. When he returned home, he found the apartment empty and Lorie was nowhere to be found. There was no sign of struggle, no evidence that she had been forced out, and no indication of where she might have gone. The reaction from the Tallahassee community was one of shock and confusion. Lorie had been a quiet, studious girl, someone who kept to herself and prioritized schoolwork. She wasn't the type to run away. The neighborhood, typically safe and quiet, had never seen a case like this. The neighbors knew Lorie and her father well, and none of them had noticed anything unusual the night she disappeared. As the hours stretched into days, the search for Lorie intensified, but there were no solid leads. Lorie's mother, Miranda Paige, was especially vocal in her disbelief. She was adamant that her daughter would not have left on her own. "There's no way Lorie would just run away," Miranda said in interviews. "She's afraid of everything, even the dark." She wasn't the type of child to just disappear. Her mother's words added weight to the concern that Lorie's disappearance wasn't a simple case of running away, as the police initially suggested. Miranda's belief that her daughter would never willingly leave home clashed with the police theory that Lorie had run off. The Tallahassee Police Department, however, maintained that Lorie could have left on her own. Without any signs of forced entry or any clues pointing to foul play, the case was initially treated like a runaway. But as the investigation continued, something didn't add up. Lorie had no known history of running away. Her teachers confirmed she had always been focused on her schoolwork, and her friends described her as a quiet girl who avoided drama. No one believed she would just disappear, especially not without a trace. Adding to the confusion was the fact that Lorie seemed to have no digital footprint. She didn't use social media, and there was no phone, no text messages, no emails, and no sign of her in online spaces. This lack of evidence made it incredibly difficult to track her movements or determine who she might have interacted with in the days leading up to her disappearance. The police did not find any video footage of Lorie on local CCTV cameras, and there were no witnesses who reported seeing her after the night she went missing. With no signs of her online presence or any concrete evidence, the investigation into Lorie's disappearance became even more puzzling. The initial theory that Lorie had run away was soon questioned. Was she lured away by someone? Did someone take her against her will? Was there something about her home life that had prompted her to leave, or was something else at play entirely? At the start of the investigation, the Tallahassee Police Department treated Lorie's disappearance as a typical runaway case. They assumed that, like some other children, Lorie might have left on her own, possibly due to some personal issues or trouble at home. However, Lorie's teachers and church leaders quickly disagreed with this assumption. They knew Lorie well, and they were certain that she would never willingly leave. She was a quiet, focused student with no history of running away, and no one could understand why she would disappear without telling anyone. Concerned for her safety, these community members took matters into their own hands. They organized their own search efforts, spreading awareness and calling for more resources to be put toward finding Lorie. Despite their efforts, there were no new leads, and the case seemed to stall. As the months passed with no answers, attention slowly shifted toward the one person who had been with Lorie before she disappeared, her father, Andrew Wiley. What began as a routine missing child case started to change course when investigators began looking deeper into his story. Andrew had said Lorie left the apartment with a backpack while he was working a night shift, but over time, that explanation raised more questions than it answered. Detectives noticed inconsistencies in the timeline and gaps in what Andrew said happened that night. In early 2024, the investigation took a major turn. Authorities executed a search warrant and seized Andrew's phone. Forensic experts analyzed its contents, and what they found changed everything. The phone revealed a pattern of internet searches that deeply concerned investigators. Andrew had been researching remote areas in Alabama and Georgia, locations that were isolated, wooded, and hard to access. Many of the searches mentioned places with bodies of water or deep woods, which are difficult areas to search thoroughly. This discovery raised strong suspicions that Lorie's disappearance may not have been random or unplanned. At this point, the Federal Bureau of Investigation stepped in to support the case. They worked closely with the Tallahassee Police Department and helped expand the search beyond Florida. Based on Andrew's phone activity and digital footprint, investigators began targeting specific rural locations in Thomas County, Georgia. These areas became the focus of multiple search operations, even though nothing was immediately found. At the time, thick brush and poor visibility had made the area almost impossible to search thoroughly. Investigators also began to re-examine Andrew's behavior during the months following Lorie's disappearance. One of the most critical findings came from forensic testing on his vehicle. DNA analysis showed evidence that Lorie had been bleeding in the car. This was a powerful discovery, one that connected Andrew directly to her final moments. As this evidence was reviewed, it added weight to the growing theory that Lorie's death may have happened closer to home than anyone had believed in the beginning. Another alarming detail came from court documents. Investigators stated that Andrew had taken steps to destroy digital devices and remove information. There were also indications that he had plans to leave the country. These actions suggested that he may have been trying to avoid accountability. His silence in the media, his lack of involvement in community searches, and the evidence pointing to his personal devices created a clear picture for law enforcement. While a motive has not been officially confirmed, Investigators believe Lori's death may have been tied to events inside the home. Whether it was the result of a family conflict that turned tragic or something more complex, authorities had reached a point where they could no longer view Andrew as just a grieving father. The digital evidence, the physical findings, and his behavior painted a picture that brought the case closer to its turning point and closer to long-awaited answers. Nearly 2 years had passed since Lori Paige disappeared, and the case had grown colder with each passing day. The community's hope of finding her alive began to fade, but the investigation continued. In April 2025, a breakthrough came in a most unexpected way. A prescribed burn, part of a land management effort, cleared an overgrown area in Thomas County, Georgia. This was a place that had already been searched multiple times, but this time, something was different. The fire had removed the dense brush that had previously obscured the area, and it revealed what had been hidden for so long: Lori's remains. Detectives, who had been tirelessly searching for any trace of Lorie, quickly returned to the site. This time, they were able to recover the evidence they had been desperately seeking. The discovery came as a devastating blow to Lori's family, the community, and the investigators who had spent countless hours looking for answers. The remains were confirmed to be Lori's, and the truth that everyone feared had finally come to light. Just days after Lori's remains were found, Andrew Wiley, Lori's father, was arrested and charged with second-degree murder. The arrest came as a result of new evidence that pointed directly to him. Forensic analysis of his car had uncovered DNA evidence linking him to Lori's death. This discovery, combined with inconsistencies in his earlier statements and his failure to cooperate with the investigation, led to his arrest. After nearly 2 years of unanswered questions, the truth about what happened to Lori Paige was finally starting to come into focus, but the pain and shock for those who loved her were far from over. The news of Lori Paige's death sent a wave of heartbreak across Tallahassee. For nearly 2 years, people in her school, her church, and her neighborhood had hoped she would be found alive. When her remains were identified and her father was arrested, the emotions many had been holding in came rushing to the surface. There was sorrow, but also frustration and disbelief. This wasn't just about losing a child. It was the shock of realizing that someone who had once been seen as a trusted parent was now accused of taking that child's life. The pain ran deep, especially among the teachers and church leaders who had stepped in when others stayed silent. Many of them had organized search parties, passed out flyers, and refused to let the case fade from public view. These were the people who kept Lori's name alive when official updates stopped coming. Now, they were left with a heavy truth that many had feared but weren't prepared to face. Pastor Rudy Ferguson, a local leader and advocate for the Paige family, spoke publicly, saying, "We really all adopted Lorie." His words captured how deeply the community had connected with her story. As people mourned, attention turned to how the investigation was handled. The Tallahassee Police Department came under fire for their early response. Many in the community felt that Lori's disappearance hadn't been taken seriously enough from the start. Flyers labeled her as a runaway, and key pieces of evidence, like the home computer and her father's car, were not examined immediately. In an interview with WCTV, Police Chief Lawrence Ravel admitted that there were areas where his department could have done better. He explained that Lori's case had even caused him to reconsider how missing children are labeled on flyers, pushing for a change in how cases like this are handled moving forward. Even though the case had reached a turning point, people in Tallahassee were still left asking difficult questions. Could Lorie have been found sooner? Were warning signs missed? And most importantly, how do you rebuild trust in a system that didn't act quickly enough? For now, the community remains in mourning, holding on to Lori's memory, while also demanding better for every other child who may need help. The arrest of Andrew Wiley for the murder of his daughter, Lori Paige, brought a sense of closure to the long-running case. However, for those who had been close to Lorie, including her teachers, friends, and members of the Tallahassee community, the pain of losing her didn't go away. Lorie had been a well-liked, quiet, and determined student at Griffin Middle School. Her teachers remembered her as someone who worked hard, never wanted to disappoint, and always stayed focused on her education. They had been part of the tireless search efforts, hoping every day that Lorie would come home safely. But even with the truth coming to light, Lorie's death left an irreplaceable void. While the arrest marked a turning point in the investigation, it also opened up discussions about what went wrong during the early days of the case. The Tallahassee Police Department faced criticism for their handling of Lorie's disappearance. Community members, as well as some experts, noted that the investigation could have been handled differently. Key pieces of evidence were overlooked in the beginning, and the case was initially treated as a simple runaway incident rather than a possible crime. This case highlighted significant gaps in the way missing child cases are handled, especially when it comes to acting quickly and gathering evidence. The aftermath of Lorie's case sparked a broader conversation about improving how law enforcement responds to missing child cases. Many believe that if the case had been treated with more urgency from the start, the outcome might have been different. The hope was that Lorie's tragic story could serve as a lesson to ensure that future cases of missing children receive the prompt and thorough investigation they deserve. Though justice had been served in Lorie's case, the emotional toll on her family, friends, and the community remained. Her death was a painful reminder of the vulnerability of children and the importance of vigilance, not just by law enforcement, but by everyone who is part of a child's life. The community was left to reflect on the lessons learned, knowing that while nothing could bring Lorie back, there was a shared responsibility to protect and support the next generation. Lori Paige's story serves as a powerful and heartbreaking reminder of the dangers that children face every day. Her tragic fate underscores the critical importance of being vigilant in our communities. Children rely on the adults around them for protection, and when that trust is betrayed, it not only shatters their lives, but the lives of everyone who cares for them. Lorie's disappearance and death highlight the need for constant awareness, especially when a child goes missing. Her case urges us all to never stop searching, to advocate for stronger protocols in law enforcement, and to always listen when a child expresses fear, discomfort, or a need for help. As a society, we need to ask ourselves, what can we do differently to ensure the safety of our children? This case serves as a wake-up call to all of us. We must support stronger child safety measures, ensure better training for law enforcement when handling missing children cases, and hold those responsible for protecting children to higher standards. We must create environments where children feel safe to speak up, where families are equipped with the resources and support they need, and where communities come together to protect their most vulnerable members. Lorie's story may have ended in tragedy, but her life and the lessons it teaches us are far from over. It is up to each of us to take action, to ensure that no other child has to face the same fate. It's time to do more for the safety of our children and to honor Lorie's memory by making our community safer, one step at a time.